This is the pretty Atacama square with these huge trees and some flowers and benches to sit on. This is Iglesias, San Pedro. 17th century it was started. Present wall 1745, bell tower 1890. It's hot now, although there are places with shade. Just finished with the museum, so it's time to get something to eat. Preferably a salad, maybe some kind of rice. Interesting tree with what look like red flowers in it. Where I had lunch on Wednesday.
Raspáis la olla, no raspáis la olla. Y busquemos el camino.
This is a long street that comes from the town square. Doesn't turn to the right anywhere, and this is outskirts of town, not more than about 4 or 5 blocks away from the square. A little bit of pragmatic fence, 50-gallon drum tops, and the drum opened up wide. And a whole bunch of drums. It's one of the few paved roads in town. Much of the buildings along these roads are hostels or hotels of varying quality. This looks like a pretty new one. This one's heavily advertised with colored advertisements, and I've got a feeling that it's probably outside money. In other words, outside of Atacama. And there's the entrance, I think, to another elegant place to stay. Whatever this is, the same designer did some work across the street. Completing a U, bringing me back into town, or in the center of town rather. Interesting, here's a very large piece of property with birds and beautiful trees, bamboo, fruit trees over there, quince tree here, or quince. That looks like oranges, but I don't know for sure what it is. Pretty much on my way out of town, just walking to the fort of Pucara. It's about 7 o'clock. This is the Rio San Pedro River that runs through San Pedro de Atacama, which is in itself a oasis because of this river and another river that happen to meet at this point. There is a trace of water in it, although where that water comes from I'm not terribly sure. It may also be apparently subterranean water. There is some water that is irrigation water, and substantial amount of it. I think that may be coming from the mountains directly, the Andes in other words. Very much on the outskirts of town, en route to Pucara or whatever it is, fort. And here is the last, I think, hotel in town itself. And I'm about, well, something's wrong with my analysis. Looking back the way I've come there, it looks like the Andes. So I don't know where that water's coming from. What's interesting is the sky is once again filled with clouds. And I think this has been of the 4 days, for 4 or 5 days, let's see, what is it, 5 days I've been here, it's been cloudy. And they claim they have 350 days of cloudless skies. This is a good thing because it keeps it cooler. The only really neat thing would be is if it rained. It doesn't rain much. There's one family that benefits from the nearby water. You can see maize or corn growing over there. Perhaps there are other crops that I can't identify. Some of those trees may actually be capable of fruit. Okay, now I'll settle on a pronunciation. Pucara de Quitor. 1 kilometer aproximado. Here I'm crossing the riverbed again, and in some spots there's certainly evidence of water. It's a little dampness there. Then a little bit farther where it dips down the lowest is some water. I'm guessing that this may indicate that the water level underneath. A bunch of horses out for their early morning drink. Horses and burros. I don't know where this water's coming from, but it may be that they have a program for letting a certain amount of water go in daily up above here for the use of the families and ranches out here. Okay, this is the fort. And you can see terracing up there for crops. Here's some kind of a runoff source for water when there was water. This is very reminiscent of the Anasazi. My guess is that rock work is rock work. And so you see some common things like the holes for holding the posts. It has the look of a formidable fort, but they didn't have guns. And now I'll go up and see Plaza Quitor. Looks like a new motel. Pretty little square, giant beautiful tree. And some kind of arch there that's new, inviting access to something, so let's go see. This is the big tree that has those seed pods that are used for either alcohol and also for teething babies because it's sweet and it helps their teeth come in. Notice the intent to keep the place neat and clean. This is all starting to look a little too spiffy, a little too commercial, like it's in connection with that new hotel. So see the carved head on the left. Don't know who HPS is, but maybe Marcella, if I'm interested, can translate that for me. Well, it gets us into the guts of the mountains here. A tunnel access. Again, you can see definite evidence of water runoff. Another cave. I think these were caused when, during the Ice Age, it was glacial, and the water running under the glacier carved these, I think, but I don't know. Little stairway, so we'll give it a shot. I don't know if we're supposed to imply from these rocks partially blocking this area that this could have been used as a habitation. It's obviously a runoff, a little chasm. This may answer the question of who. From this little pinnacle and looking at those pot-like things, I'm thinking this was some kind of a mining operation. For what, I don't know. Those might have been just something that held water. A little pan of the valley. I'll just keep walking up it in the hopes I can get a ride, although it looks like the road ends here. Another face. My guess is that this was a mine of some sort, and after it was shut down some considerable time probably, somebody bought it and put in this hotel and made this little mall as an accoutrement to the hotel. This pan, this new and expensive being built motel. Each room will have a view of the river as well as up canyon and down canyon. I'm sure there will be all the other amenities, since they will be somewhat of a trapped audience. Here we're seeing the juncture of a fairly significant and new component of the irrigation system. Don't know what this part of the system function it performs, except that those holes are probably to stop things like that rock and branches and so forth. It's a reservoir that can dump water to the right, and it seems to take it from this channel which is flowing fully here, and above it it's really flowing. I mean, that's a lot of water, given that this is a desert and one of the driest in the world. So the purpose of this may just be to either interface that channel with this one or to slow the water down a little bit. It's interesting, there are a couple of, and this may be where they shunt the water to the road area that I was walking up, because this line here goes back behind me and over the other side of the river and presumably down that river path. Fairly decent retaining wall. So coming from up canyon, it reaches this new component, which is a double-barreled one. So this pipe here is the one I just photographed, and it carries the water quite a ways down. Then there's that smaller one that routes it somewhere else. That looks like it's a water intake gate. It doesn't look like, although it would flow out if this were closed and it built. Working my way up the valley to Catarpe, which was the Inca administrative center for this area, that once they conquered this area. Little did they know, of course, how hauntingly eerie it is that within, I forget how many years, 990, the Spaniards would be here, and all of the presumed power and glory of the Inca civilization. As I hike up canyon, I keep looking in these side canyons, because somewhere up here is Quebrada de Diablo. I think I visited it when I was on one of the first tour, the Valle de Valle de Luna. And it's supposed to be up here somewhere. I'm thinking the entranceway is right there in the center. So that might be kind of fun to hike up there. I can hear the definite roar of water over there and see what looks like an irrigation channel. My guess is that that raised area fenced in or fenced off is a reservoir. Still doesn't answer the question, of course. That's where the water's coming from. You would think the property owner, the buildings are behind those trees, has it made in this context, being this close to the reservoir, literally next to it, or growing as corn and so forth. A Chilean guide and his horse guide and his tourist companion are riding off across from left to right, but I just wanted to look at these mountains because you can get a pretty good idea of how this little chunk has been tipped radically. Now this is a little bit more novel. This is a free-flowing river at this point, but where does the water come from? It's a very substantial little river. Ever present in the simplest forms in this kind of country. But here's a pretty little valley benefiting from the nearby water. There's a little home up there or something. Don't know if it's used now or not, but it looks green, looks like an oasis. Okay, this is Tambo de Catarpe. My problem is, I don't know what Tambo means. Okay, the gentleman in the truck who's now returning from wherever he went said this whole area that I'm in now is Catarpe. Although my guidebook seems to think of it as having ruins. He said there is an Iglesia church up here about 300-400 meters, so I'll wander up to that. But it is a pretty little valley. You can understand how the Incas could have taken this over. Apparently has plenty of water. That looks like a large, but abandoned, but fairly large structure there. It might have been a home for somebody at some time. Looks like the roof there in the center at least is caved in. That may have been the patio area though. I think there in the distance is the church. Tell me the Incas were not wise to build here. How pretty this is. Reminds me of the kind of place that some wealthy American would buy out in the west. Western Wyoming, eastern Wyoming. Straight ahead is something I think's interesting there. It looks like an animal with its just its eyes and the top of its head exposed. Like maybe a snake lurking. I wonder if those holes existed in the time of the Incas. I'm getting more and more convinced that this water comes from the Andes. Because first of all, I can't see how it could come the other way, but there are some pretty high peaks. And of course here, the telltale configuration of the Andes volcanoes. And it looks like another estancia. Getting closer. entrance to the bell tower. Don't see any ropes hanging down, or do I? Yes, I do, a thin one. So maybe it still rings once in a while. I climbed up onto this bench, and what is here is a memorial. This pan will give you an appreciation for the for the valley behind me. This is what I think of when I think of the moon, maybe. Except more pockmarked and probably not mountains that as high as that. I think that may be the beginning of the valley. You can see a goodly number of fields. Don't look like they're currently in production, but that could be because this is fall. So apparently my hike has taken me all the way down to that point down there, and then quite a distance into town. Down there is that Tomba de Pucara, so I think I'll hike up that and see what it is. The geology is kind of interesting here. On top it looks like a rock cap that may be volcanic ash hardened into tuff. But beneath it, it looks like very fragile, soft, some kind of mudstone maybe, from long-term water deposition. And then you come across this little river valley, and now we're looking at this hill that I'm up on. And you can see it goes even higher, and behind me even higher. But this is all rounded rock, which indicates being rolled around in streams. So once again, I make the observation that if I were not here, I would be at home wondering what to do for the day, or doing something highly predictable. And here I am all by myself. Nobody else has been out here, just that one truck. There was a couple on horseback back a couple 3 miles. And I'm making a 12.5 mile hike out to this area. It's exactly what I love to do most. Behind the structures that we'll see in a moment is this farming area or garden area, but it looks like those are maybe grapevines down there, which is kind of interesting. All this has been abandoned, at least for the moment. In fact, I think it's been abandoned, but looks like there are 2 or 3 habitations here. One to the right, that little one in the center, and the long one to the left. And then the palapas in the center courtyard. The roof is mudded over. A little bit of an effort has been made here. It looks like to make the water run off to the right there. That's probably the cooking area where they see that stove. We see that pipe. And these little corrals here for maybe pigs, probably sheep, maybe a cow or 2. Although I don't know if there's any grass for cows here. These pen areas are disconnected from the house proper. There's another kind of habit. This looks like it's for chickens. That would probably be the entrance to the house there. There's a plentiful supply of those nut-like things that I saw in the museum coming from one of these trees. And notice also this tree with the green bark like a Palo Verde. In the American deserts, that's where its photosynthesis occurs. This is kind of interesting. This plant is seeping out some kind of white fluid that covers its stem in sufficiently enough amounts that it drops down pools beneath. I wonder what the purpose of that is. A Closer look at that white seepage. Now here a little twist in the geography. That same kind of what looks like very loose, fragile mudstone or whatever underneath, and then there's that conglomerate layer. Back here again, now I'll go hike up it and see what's going on. Don't know where this is going to lead. Certainly we're talking substantial water runoff here. Although the man in the truck told me that there were no real ruins here, if in fact there are ruins, these may be the remains of it. Or they could just be current remains. The curious thing is, this is sitting up on a bluff that I cannot see how it serves any purpose for a man to drive his sheep up here or to live up here. More ruins across the gulch there. Far more intelligent and realistic to be down below. On the other hand, for the Incas, who may have had some concerns with their own existence, considering that they used force if they had to take over these indigenous people, if they feared for themselves, it would be very realistic to put their buildings and their lifestyle completely up on top of this very defensible bluff, accessed only by very steep trails. There's some further evidence. The stone looks like it could have been used for a grinding stone. And to the side of this building is clearly a matat. So here I look at the full extent of it. If you look closely, you can sense the somewhat human piles of stone. Some are obvious, and some not so. But even back behind that rock, appears to be wall type things, certainly a wall there. Magnificent view of the Andes and of the valley beneath them. Get a closer look at those across that other ravine. Look fairly substantial in their preservation. You can see that this is a pretty large area. It also seems to me befitting that the Incas would not only find protection here, but find it quite quaint that those natives who had any reason to be up here, which is limited, would have to do the ones climbing. The wealthy may have lived up here all. Here seems to be a shard of pottery, just the slightest little bit of concavity where my thumb is rubbing. And also on the outside, this white portion. Here you can see that there's a small room back inside there. It was made by rock and mortar, if that may be recent. This is curious stone to me. It reminds me of either asbestos or petrified wood, and it does crumble easily. That pipe reminds me of what might be a digging hole by archaeologists. Again, the ground here seems littered with shards of pottery, if in fact it's pottery. It does have that concavity, maybe you can see it there. Here a thinner one. seems to be consistent thickness. This one, the outer side is red and on both sides, and then a darker interior. A little mortar and rock in this relatively small cavity, which looks like it could be for storage of grain or whatever. Here it looks like the walls of a structure might have been on this edge. Maybe the edge projected out farther in those days. Now that looks like an edge of rock there. Here again is another hole, or pipe rather. Again, notice the difficulty of any armed force trying to assault this. And the high ground usually wins. Quite probable that this trail, or a trail like it, would have been used to access here. Easily controlled by a few armed men. From here there are some lower barricades, if that's what they are. Maybe they were just designed as platforms and this is the support. But now presumably, according to one of the guides, the body of water that created these sedimentary landforms was an inland sea and did not actually have access to the ocean, although it has a considerable amount of salt in it, which perhaps just came out of rocks that existed before as they were eroded. Well, there's no sign identifying this. I think this is Quebrada de Diablo, because there are a lot of mountain bike tracks here and they said it was a great place to mountain bike. This is the tree, apparently, that all these nut type things come off of. I cracked open the outer shell, but the inner part just seems to be a dry stuff like a malt ball, only quite hard, and maybe a center of something. I can't get at it. I'll put it in my pocket and open it up with a knife. It's interesting how the water has eroded right up against this sheet of slightly harder material. Notice the cave up above. And my guess is the canyon just continues on up through this. Probably great for mountain biking, but anticlimactic for hiking. I'm up on a little pile of rubble here, and the white stuff, which at first as you walk on it, it's crunchy like seashells, but in fact I think it's salt. So those white layers that we see in that brownish weak rock is some coalescing of salt. Maybe it's caliche or caliche. I'm walking across this mud stuff, the stuff that comes off the mountain here when it's raining, and it's actually quite strong, very crunchy. Hopefully, maybe up here you can hear my feet crunching on it. Yeah, there we go. You can see the salt. You can see that this area I'm walking across apparently gets a lot of water and can get really boggy and muddy. And now it's kind of real rocky and real hard. There's salt, and it breaks through because apparently when the mud dries, still the sky remains cloudy, very cloudy. It's not a thick cloud, probably not even capable of rain. Here is a piece of stone that looks like it's got a very high content of copper, if in fact it's not a chunk of copper. I'm going to bang it on this rock. I broke it apart and you can see little spots of green in there, so my guess is that it's porous and that there's copper in it, but it's not a... Here's some little tadpoles. Some guys in bicycles going by. Don't know what that dragonfly is after. Unless it just fell into the water. I was watching it go down. I think its feet are sticking up, so I think it's in the death throes. I managed to get a stick to that dragonfly, but whether he will or it will recover sufficiently enough to be able to fly, I don't know. just from looking at either side or both sides of this valley I'm in, you can tell how the valley was created. There's some kind of a fault right down the center of this valley. You notice the right side is tipped up very radically,